Well, I don't know about you, but most of us average hunters, we don't always have the option to just hunt the wind. Or, if you want to hunt and you only have X amount of properties, but the wind's blowing in the wrong way, sometimes you got to think of strategies or ways you can eliminate your scent good enough to where you can shoot a mature whitetail downwind of you.
Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 281. Ethan Featheroff, Boots in the Creek, Top of the Sticks. Support for the Big Buck Registry and the Deer Hunt Podcast comes from Rackology. Everything you need in one bag. Now available at Rural King and Orslyn Farm and Home storefronts. Or online at www.rackology.org. Minus 33 merino wool layering system. Timeless natural insulation, keeping you warm on the coldest days while staying breathable and wicking away moisture on the wet ones without the old school itch of regular wool. Grizzly Ears, the most advanced engineered wireless earbuds for the outdoors. Covert scouting cameras, remote cameras for hunting, wildlife, and security. QuietKat, the all-terrain electric bicycle. Visit quietkat.com. That's QUIETKAT.com and use the discount code BIGBUCK15 to secure 15% off your next QuietKat purchase. And Big Buck merch. You can get cool, high-quality Big Buck t-shirts, long-sleeve t-shirts, and hoodies. And show support for this podcast by visiting www.bigbuckregistry.com/MERCH. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hey, this is Don Higgins from Higgins Outdoors and Real World Wildlife Products. Tune in and hear one of my favorite podcasts, the Big Buck Registry.
This is John Eberhart. I've been hunting out of a saddle since 1981. I'm about to listen to my favorite podcast, Big Buck Registry, Deer Hunting Podcast.
This is Zach Farnball with the Hunting Public, and you're about to listen to one of my favorite podcasts, Big Buck Registry.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow predators. My name is Jay, and thank you for tuning in to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. For Dusty Phillips and Jim Keller and the entire staff here at the Big Buck Registry, welcome to this week's show. There are a couple things I'd like you to do for us if you could. If you would, please check us out on iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review. With your help, we're going to try and push this show up the iTunes charts. I know we have a lot of listeners out there, and I need you to take some action. I need you to leave a review and subscribe to the show. If you do subscribe, that'll give you access and notification each and every week that a new show is released. You can also access this show in its entirety on YouTube, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and as an Amazon Alexa skill. Go to Alexa and say, Alexa, enable Big Buck Registry. It's all right there for you to access on demand at your fingertips. Regarding the harness program, we have an ample supply of harnesses to give away from our volunteer donors. If you're in need of a full body harness, please send an email to j@bigbuckregistry.com. Chase the dream. Don't listen to the doubters. That's how Ethan Featheroff approaches each day. Ethan, after killing a 200-inch buck despite having a torn shoulder joint and a separated bicep, knows how to fight through pain to accomplish a goal. Ethan shares with us his stand approach system, how he pushes the deer trail with his game cameras, and why he prefers hunting early season over any other time. We'll get to our entire interview with Ethan Featheroff in just one moment, but before we do, let's hear from our friends at Rackology, minus 33 merino wool products, and Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Hey, it's Eric Fitzgerald here with Rackology. Wanted to visit you briefly about one of the most exciting products that we got in the market with Rackology. This is our food plot fertilizer. You can supplement your deer right through your food plot with this product. This is not your normal NPK. This has got so many goodies in this bag. Basically what it does is it makes your soil work for you so you can get by with just using fertilizer like this and not a lot of synthetics. If you want a good food plot and you want deer coming in and healthy plants, look at the food plot fertilizer through Rackology. Check us out at rackology.org. Thanks for tuning in.
let's talk about a hunter's layering system for a sec. We need to be ready for any weather that Mother Nature throws at us. With the layering concepts that Minus 33 has created with their incredible merino wool products, they've got you covered. The Minus 33's merino wool expedition weight garments will keep you warm on the coldest late season days while regulating and wicking away moisture in a way that only merino wool can do. You see, wool will absorb up to 30% of its weight in moisture without leaving you feeling wet or clammy, and wool insulates better than cotton or polyester and protects against hypothermia on those late season hunts. And here's another interesting point. You might not think of wool for early season, but with the Minus 33 wicking technology, I'll take a lightweight Minus 33 base layer any day in warm weather. Merino wool fibers naturally reject any bacteria found in moisture or sweat and gives you double protection against odor as your target buck approaches. Visit www.minus33.com to learn more about Minus 33's layering technology. Use the code BIGBUCK33 to get 10% off your next order.
Now here's Jim Keller with the deer news.
Our first story this week, deer hit by planes. It's happened twice this year at New Jersey airports. This story is from the Courier Post online website and was reported by Gerald Stoss Hout. New Jersey drivers are familiar with the occasional deer strike, but deer on runways? Twice in recent months, pilots have struck deer that have wandered onto airport grounds. In May, a pilot told National Transportation Safety Board investigators he had just lifted off at South Jersey Regional Airport in Lumberton when a deer struck the fuselage on the right side, according to a report recently made available. The pilot, a 75-year-old West Hampton, Burlington County man with nearly 3,000 hours of flight time, was able to bring the plane back into a landing pattern and safely put it on the ground. Photographs of the damage show the elevator completely removed from the aircraft. Neither the pilot or the co-pilot reported injuries. And in February, a Cessna 172 pilot struck and killed 2 deer, the NTSB said in a report issued last week. Perimeter fencing at this airport only covers the eastern and southern sides, and an airport manager told NTSB investigators that deer were frequently seen in and around the airport. A deer strike occurred at least once every 2 years, the manager told investigators, according to the report. MDC and State of Missouri increased penalties for poaching. This story is from the Missouri Department of Conservation news release. The Missouri Department of Conservation, the MDC, and the Missouri Legislature and Governor have taken actions to increase penalties for those caught poaching Missouri game animals and other native wildlife species. Missouri Governor Michael Parsons signed HB 260 into law July 11th. Called the Poaching Bill, it significantly raises fines for those convicted of illegally taking Missouri game species and other native wildlife. HB 260 was sponsored by Representative Jared Taylor of Republic and Senator Mike Bernskoder of Jefferson City. New fine amounts include $10,000 to $15,000 for each elk or black bear killed illegally, $1,000 to $5,000 for each white-tailed buck, $500 to $1,000 for each wild turkey, and $500 to $1,000 for each paddlefish. Supporters of the bill said the previous fines for poaching were too low in Missouri. The bill also gained support in part from 5 Missouri elk that were illegally killed by poachers in the past few years. None of the cases has yet been solved. The fines are considered restitution payments for poaching game animals and are ordered by a judge. Monies from the fines go to the state's School Monies Fund. The restitution payments are in addition to other fines and penalties for violating the Wildlife Code of Missouri. The new fines will go into effect on August 28th. DNR monitoring beach-going deer, considering tranquilizing possibility. This story is from the MLive.com website and reported by Melissa Frick. A white-tailed deer captured this weekend on video interacting with beachgoers along Lake Michigan is being monitored by state wildlife officials due to the safety risk. One of the options being considered, although no decision has been made, is to shoot the deer with a tranquilizer and relocate it away from the popular beach at Saugatuck Dunes State Park. A video went viral of the deer at Saugatuck Dunes State Park on Saturday, July 6, where it was seen walking up to the water and hanging out around dozens of people for more than half an hour. Because the deer has shown it's become accustomed to human presence, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources is monitoring the deer to make sure it doesn't become a safety hazard to humans, said Don Pope, a wildlife biologist at the Michigan DNR Wildlife Division. Holly Vaughn, a Michigan DNR Wildlife Communication Coordinator, said the division is considering a number of options for dealing with the buck if it becomes a safety hazard to humans. One of those options could be chemically immobilizing or tranquilizing the buck. Pope said it's still too early to tell which route the Michigan DNR will take in dealing with the buck. The department has been monitoring this buck for the past month and working with park staff to encourage people not to touch or approach the buck. Tanzanian rhino population soars by 1,000% after poaching crackdown and imports. This story is from the Fox News website. Endangered rhino populations in Tanzania rose by 1,000% after officials said the country's government quashed organized poaching gangs. Elephant populations have additionally risen by nearly half in 5 years, according to the president's office earlier this week, citing a crackdown on illegal ivory hunters. Tanzania had only 15 rhinos 4 years ago and was described as ground zero of the poaching crisis, but a recent statement said the figure was now at 167. British wildlife experts are skeptical, however, saying the spike in rhino numbers was likely due to imports rather than breeding. Mark Jones, head of policy at wildlife charity the Born Free Foundation, said both rhinos and elephants breed slowly. The recent population increase must be attributed to other factors. Tanzania's president, John Magufuli, vigorously tackled wildlife crime when he took office in 2015, pressing security forces to round up all those involved in animal trafficking. Within months of his term, 4 Chinese men were arrested for smuggling rhino horns along the Tanzania-Malawi border and were sentenced to 20 years. A prominent Chinese businesswoman dubbed the Ivory Queen was also imprisoned for 15 years in Tanzania for smuggling the tusks of more than 350 elephants to Asia. A 2015 census showed elephant numbers in Tanzania dove by 60% between 2009 and 2014, dropping from 110,000 to just over 43,000. Officials subsequently launched a special task force in 2016 to fight wildlife poaching. As a result of the work of the task force, the elephant populations have increased from 43,330 in 2014 to over 60,000 presently, officials said. Demand for ivory primarily stems from China and Vietnam, where the product is turned into jewelry and ornaments. Researchers even found that some buyers believe the tusks and horns grew back on the animals after reap. Asian cultures value the rhino horn for its traditional medicinal qualities, even though scientific research proves it does not possess pharmaceutical benefits. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. Special thanks to Daniel Applebaum and John Geis for leads on stories this week. For links to the stories featured this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any ideas for future topics or have any questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Thanks to Jim Keller for the Deer News. Without further ado, here is Ethan Featheroff. Ethan Featheroff, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
We're psyched to talk to you, man. You're a diehard deer hunter at heart, and that's kind of what makes us tick over here at the Big Buck Registry, so we're excited to hear your story. Ethan, tell me about yourself. Where do you call home? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Somerset, Ohio. It's Perry County. I currently live in Bremen, Ohio. It's just about 15 minutes from where I grew up. We're about 40 minutes east of Columbus.
And we've talked to a lot of guys from Ohio. Ohio is one of the best deer states in the country. Would you?
Land of the Giants, as I call it.
Land of the Giants. That's right. So you picked a good place to call home. What was life like growing up? Did you have a mentor?
Well, I've been deer hunting and hunting in general since I was about 4 years old. Since I was a little boy, my dad, that was his passion, was deer hunting. My grandpa's. I grew up in it, and it was kind of a family tradition for all of us to get together and go hunting and do our deer drives and those kind of things. And most of my family they're all avid bow hunters, and I was just kind of the first one to, try to take this to the next level and think, well, I love it so much, maybe I could get to the point where I could have a career out of it. And I've just became obsessed with archery and harvesting whitetails. And like I said, they were all pretty much mentors to me, and I attribute pretty much all my success to them, helping me do this. And I feel like I'm bringing it all to light, but it's really, I want them to kind of, see what they started. That's kind of how I am with it.
Can you point at one particular person or individual that helped you along the way?
I would have to say my dad. Like, funny story to go into that is my grandpa actually passed away, and my dad got his bow. It was a left-handed bow, and my grandpa was the only one in the family that was left-handed. And my dad actually gave me that bow that was gifted to him, and I used that to shoot my first whitetail. Was a 12-pointer, and it was just a really cool memory because I was with my dad when that had happened, and at that point from that point on, I just became hooked on the hunting.
I think we all have those moments, right? Like when when it clicks and like, okay, I'm in for, this is a lifetime affair here.
Yeah.
I'm in for good. When you're talking about hunting in general, did you have, has it been like bow hunting the whole time, or were there transitions from like guns into bow and arrows?
I started off with a bow since I was big enough to shoot. I've been shooting bows since about 4 years old, but my family loves both. I mean, we gun hunt and archery hunt. It just, archery was always, you know, the favorite in the family. So that's kind of what we did the most. But yeah, like I said, we do both. I love all hunting. It doesn't matter whether it's with a gun or bow or a stick. If you can do it, I've tried it.
Tell me about your bow setup. What are you shooting for a bow? What have you shot over the years? What are you most comfortable with? So
I shoot bear bows. I've been shooting bear bows since I was little. I love Fred Bear and everything it stands for. I'm a traditional guy in a sense. I also like to shoot recurves, but like I said, with Fred Bear, you know, he was kind of a pioneer of our sport and helped kick it off for us. And I just admire everything about the man and his traditions towards hunting. So that's why I've always stuck with bear bows.
That makes sense. I mean, it's you find a brand you like and you kind of stick with it. So what kind of arrows are you into? What kind of broadheads do you prefer?
This past year I was shooting Beemans, and I shot the buck I harvested this past year was with a Rage hypodermic. I shoot several different broadheads. Like I said, I like to switch it up and just see what works best for me. Depending on the animal I'm hunting, sometimes I'll use a fixed blade.
Tell me about like your strategies and styles and techniques. And, you know, bow hunting traditionally is on the ground, or it's, well, sometimes on the ground in a blind or in a tree stand. Maybe you're a climber. How do you set up for the season?
I'm traditionally an early season hunter. I love hunting as soon as it starts. I feel like that's my best time to pattern a deer. Okay. And as far as setting up tree stands or sitting on the ground, I kind of let the terrain tell me what's best. I like to hunt off the ground and I like to hunt out of a tree. I guess it just depends on the situation and where the deer are coming from. Because, you know, there's a lot of spots where there's big bucks and people don't want to go hunt them because, like, where do I put a stand to hunt this deer? I'm like, there's always the ground.
That's a good point. Good point. So, how do you decide?
I kind of decide based on, like I said, the terrain. If you're in a tree, are you going to be skylined? Or if I'm on the ground, am I in a spot where maybe that deer's coming up over a hill? Okay. And he's not going to see me immediately. Like there's a long distance for him. If there's a long distance for him to come and he can see through a flat field, probably sitting right on the ground isn't the best spot because he's going to pick you out before he gets there. I like to hunt him early. And the way that I do that is I almost generally go to my spots that have bean fields and I'll set cameras up around the edges and I'll start finding those deer on the fields. Because early season, they're pretty consistent to those fields. And what I like to do is once I find them in those fields, I'll start to trickle cameras on trails that come in and out of those fields. Okay. All right. And face them into the woods. That way I can get a better idea from where they're coming. Because sometimes, you know, you see a big buck in a field and he's on your camera every other night, but that doesn't mean that's where he's coming out. You know, he could be coming out on the other side of the field and you could give yourself a much better opportunity if you knew where he was coming out versus trying to hunt him coming to your food and it's getting closer to dark.
Right. That makes total sense. When you're setting up these cameras and you're looking at these trails, how do you decide what trails to put them on?
As far as deciding which trails to put them on, I have a strategy just called put a camera on every trail.
All right, that makes sense.
And what I'll do is when I put a camera on every trail, I'll find the ones that deer's using the most consistent. Yeah. And then once I find those, I'll take them back farther into the woods until I'm able to catch that deer earlier. Say I want to catch him at 10 or 11 in the morning. When I'm catching him back there near his bedding areas, that's about where I stop because I'll try to, if he's coming to the field after dark, I'll just set somewhere between the food and the bedding and hopefully I can catch him on one of those trails coming out.
So you're taking the point of the trail, you're putting a camera on it early season. And what is early season for you, by the way? What time of year?
our season starts September 29th. I start putting cameras on the trails right now. If I'm seeing the bucks in the field, June, July, I'm starting to put those cameras on the trails and follow them back into there. Because a lot of the struggles that most Ohio hunters have is we don't have the opportunity to hunt deer when they still have their velvet on. It seems like when they have their velvet on, they're hanging out in the fields a lot. But once they start to go hard horn, they're getting more into the timber, rubbing their velvet, getting ready for pre-rut and all that.
Right.
Here in Ohio, I mean, if you don't have a pressured area, I mean, those deer will still come to the field. It just gets harder and harder and harder as those first couple of weeks go by.
Gotcha. So you kind of start pre-September 29th. Is that when you start seeing the big bucks in the fields? Is that when you start trying to find their normal routes into the fields?
Yeah, I start trying to find their routes in the fields, like I said, between June and July. And then hopefully by the time September rolls around, I've already got a good idea of where I want to set up on those animals.
So for the deer that you're looking at for this year, you probably have already started doing some of this.
Yeah, I've got several on camera. It's just right now after shooting what I shot last year, I'm struggling to decide what I should go for this year, because I want to continue that success and try to shoot mature whitetails. And like I said, most people probably tell you once you shoot at 200, it's pretty much down from there. So you get more and more selective.
Absolutely. I mean, 200 is like the pinnacle, right? Now you're going to okay, I'll shoot.
Yeah.
I mean, let's go through that for a second. Now that you're in the 200 club, do you shoot another 200 or something that you think is close to it? Or where do you draw your line? I know that's easier said than done when you're in the tree and there's something that you think might be close, but
yeah, I talk to a lot of friends and family about that, because it's like, they're like, well, where do you go from here? And I so badly wanted to just I'm just going to hold out and shoot another 200. But the truth of the matter is you can't shoot another 200 if it's not on your property. I'm a hunter. I love to hunt. I think your duty as you grow up and mature is just to be able to take the best animal available, harvest the most mature animal you can, regardless of whether it has 200 inches or 130 inches on its head. So that's kind of where I've came with that.
So it's not that you're hunting for the 200 incher. You're hunting for the biggest buck on the property at that time.
Yeah, the most mature animal. What's available to you, because I feel like if I just set out to shoot 200s, that's an unrealistic goal, and I'm probably not going to enjoy myself as much as a hunter.
Right. It is interesting. As somebody who's never shot a 200-inch deer, but I've certainly talked to plenty of people that have, it's interesting to hear the perspective. Like, does that reset your threshold? Do you now not cross that line? You're saying you do cross the line. You don't settle for the 200-inch. You settle for the biggest mature buck that you can find on the properties that you're hunting.
Well, this is like I was telling my buddies, when it comes to whitetails, the past 5 years, I've shot 5 Pope and Young deer in a row.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily about the rack size, you know what I mean? It's just getting the most mature animal and being as successful as you can be.
Right.
And like I said, that's kind of my beliefs. I know everybody's different. Some people want to chase the 200, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
At the same time, we should be proud of the guy that shoots the 120-inch deer. I just feel it's a personal preference, and you should be happy for all the people hunting out there, regardless of size or age. If it's an accomplishment to them and it makes them proud, then I'm proud for them.
Right. That makes sense. Again, and even like as a kid growing up, I used to love fishing these brooks, and you were fishing for some rainbows, some brookies, and they weren't like world class. Brooks. These are just little brooks. They were out in the middle of nowhere, and you could start on a road and then follow them all the way back into the mountains, and I loved it. And I'd spend all day doing it. And one day I got talking to a fly fisherman who loved catching 24-inch rainbows out of the North Branch of some river that ran through New York City. And I said, well, the trout I caught yesterday was 14 inches. He goes, oh, that's nothing. I catch 24 inches all the time. I said, yeah, but how big are the trout in the stream? So, well, they're all 24. So, well, the biggest trout in my stream is 14 inches. The next biggest one was probably 6. So,
yeah,
it's all relative, right?
Yeah, I guess it's just something that's been near and dear to my heart, especially since I shot a 200-inch deer. I went through social media going crazy and everybody kind of praising me. But no, if I had posted a picture of a small deer that maybe I'd shot, nobody cares. And they're like, why'd you shoot that? But it's just, I can't stand how the industry's just became all about the big buck. I mean, it has to mean more than that to you. For me, if that's all it meant, I probably wouldn't do it.
Right. Do you think there's a double standard?
Yeah, in ways there probably is. Like I said, everybody thinks that I'm just like a big trophy hunter because I've shot big deer, but it didn't start out that way to me. I still love shooting a doe just as much as I do harvesting a buck. It's just the passion I have for the outdoors and sharing it with my family, the memories that you make. To me, that's what it's all about. And I get it. A big rack, it sells, so that's what everybody wants to see. And I mean, we're humans. We like to make competitions out of things, but like I said, I'm cool with it both ways, but just don't bash the other person when they're happy with what they harvested.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's a competition at the end of the day, but somehow we make it that way, right?
Right.
It's really what it is to you. And so I understand where you're coming from. What other strategies and techniques it's not that you use to, when let's say you do identify a buck and you're following these trails all the way back to just before their bedding area, how far do you get from the bedding area before you say, all right, I got to call it quits here?
I guess it just depends on the time of year. If I'm going in early season, I'm not afraid to get in there. If I'm going in June, July, I'm not afraid to go all the way in that deer's bed and put a camera in there. But a strategy that I use when I'm doing so is I would only go in there and check most of my cameras if it had just rained or it's raining at the time, because I'm a firm believer that rain will keep your scent down, wash your scent off the ground. And Gotcha. It doesn't bother. Okay. It doesn't seem to bother the deer that way. That's
an interesting strategy. I hadn't really heard that before. That makes sense. So you've identified a couple of these bucks. It's July, mid-July. There are a couple of big ones that are starting to show good antlers. Maybe are left over from the year before. When do you start strategizing after that on where to set up? Obviously, starting September 29th, I would assume. You already said that early season is your favorite. Where do you start setting up? Are you setting up on these trails? Or you're just trying to get as far back towards that bedding area as you can based off of your camera strategies and positioning?
I base setting my stand-up mainly off of the time that the deer is entering the field. If I feel confident, if the deer is entering the field 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon, then I'm going to go ahead and hunt him over the food source. I'm going to hunt him on the beans. But if I see that he's not coming out to the field till almost 8 o'clock, and that gives me, a half hour of light to harvest this animal, that's when I'm looking at my camera saying, okay, I found him in the woods at 4 or 5 o'clock. And then I'm going to go about halfway between the food and that bedding area, because most of the times deer they're not doing a straight beeline to that field. They graze, they're eating acorns on the way out, they're getting a drink, and you can almost always catch that deer somewhere in the woods before he hits that field in daylight hours. So that's kind of how I try to do that. I always joke with people when they tell me that a deer's went nocturnal, and I just kind of think, how could a deer be nocturnal if it lives outside?
Right.
He's out there somewhere. He might not be on your property, or you might not be where he's at. But if you have permission to get within his bedding area, you can surely find that deer before it gets dark.
Right. So how do you move in on a buck that is really waiting? I mean, really waiting. How do you, because you got to adjust, right?
Yeah. No, access is key. I mean, in some places it's not feasible, and maybe you have to try to wait for the rut to come around, or you could do something I don't know how it is where you live, but here we're allowed to bait deer. So maybe I could put some corn out or something out to try to entice that deer to come in a little bit earlier.
Okay.
But as far as access, something that I really like to do, if I'm going in to hunt a big buck and I know that I can get within 70 to 80 yards of him and not spook him and there's a creek nearby, I will keep my boots in that creek. I walk that creek the whole time. I won't even, walk through the woods until I get to where I'm going to set in my stand. And I think that was the strategy that worked for me this year. I shot my buck about 60, 70 yards from his bed, and I walked the creek all the way up to my stand. And he was bedded on a hillside right above where I had shot him. And I knew he was going to be there. Just using your surroundings, to help you get to where you want to go, I think.
Describe this creek to me, because, it depends on where you are in the country, a creek versus a brook versus, all kinds of things. What is a creek to you, and can you describe how you walk through it? You said you walk through it to keep your scent down. Are you being quiet? What is your
Okay,
strategy?
So this creek's got a constant flowing stream to it, and it's about, I would say 15 to 20 feet wide, maybe average depth of 2 feet at that, to where my muck boots or whatever, I can still walk through it.
Okay.
And it S patterns, and I'll just follow those S's all the way up to my stand. And this deer was bedded on a ridge right above the creek, looking down at the creek and into the beans, but it was kind of thick, so I knew where I was coming through. If I stayed low in the creek, he wouldn't be able to see me.
Okay.
And I was able to use that terrain to my advantage to get up in that stand. And like I said, he was bedded up there, and about 6 o'clock, he came out about 30. He was probably about 30 yards. He had a huge 8-pointer with him, probably 150, 160-inch 8-pointer. And the big 8 had got about 20 yards from me. And I'm sitting here, heart pounding out of my chest. I tried to swing my camera arm around the film, and the big 8 looked up at me, and they both looked up at me and started to walk out of the field at about 35 yards. And I made a little noise to stop him, and he just turned around and swung his head back. And I had a perfect quartering away shot and seen my arrow snap off behind his shoulder, and he went about 30 yards up into the wood edge, and that was all she wrote.
Gotcha. So you walked this creek bed, the S turn all the way. When did you pop out? You knew. So did you know the buck was bedded there at the time, or did you have to kind of guess?
I was pretty confident that he was going to be bedded there. He became really predictable to one hillside, and he almost spent most of his time on that. And where my stand was, the creek almost hit the field that I was hunting the deer. So I was set up to where I could shoot into that creek or out into the bean field, because I knew the deer was going to do one of two things. It's a hot day. It's about 80 degrees outside. He's either going to come down to this creek to drink, or he's going to go out in his field to eat. It's just a matter of which one he did first. So I knew I had a really good opportunity. If you have water on your land and food source, there's not a whole lot of reason for that deer to leave. So I was confident that early season I was going to get that deer.
Let's take a little break, and when we come back, we'll pick up where we left off with Ethan Featheroff.
Rackology Deer Supplement and Attractant, developed through years of intense scientific research, comes a product that puts it all in one bag. Superior attractant, scientifically formulated vitamins and minerals, and all at a much better price. To get yours today, please check out rackology.org for a list of dealers. Rackology, how can you afford not to use it? Everything deer need, all in one bag.
And now back to our conversation with Ethan Featheroff. So you're kind of like splitting the two. Was the stand placement somewhere in between the field and the creek, so you knew that
I was about 20 yards off the field and 10 yards off the creek. So I could see down the whole creek. The way it S-curved through there, I could look straight down it and just see everything. So I had a good idea of I was going to have a shot at this deer no matter which way he accessed.
Gotcha. And from where you shot or where your stand was, how far away was the buck bedded?
From my stand to where the deer is bedded, I believe he was between 60 and 70 yards from my stand.
Wow, that's close. So you were able to get inside of 70 without being detected.
Yeah.
Through the creek into your stand, and it didn't make a difference. How far in advance did you get into the stand?
I got in stand about 2:30. And I shot the deer at 6.
Okay, so you've given yourself about 4 hours. So he might have thought you were gone as long as you weren't twitching up there or anything like that.
Yeah.
Gotcha. How high do you set your stands typically?
I usually go about average of 20 feet, depending on the terrain. I would say between 20 and 30 feet is the max that I would go. On that particular one, I was right at 20 feet. I was at the top of my sticks, which hit at 20 feet. A pretty interesting tactic that I used on that property, and these are things that anybody could do if you just think about it. I was seeing a property that had an oil well, and the oil well was always on. It was noisy, it was clanking, and I used that to my advantage because I wasn't far from that oil well, and I knew that would cover up a lot of sound getting into there as well. So, and another thing I like about having oil wells on properties that I hunt is it is a huge scent cover. When that's drifting through the woods and that's all you can smell, it kind of eliminates your scent from the deer. And like I said, when I shot this buck, he was downwind of me. My wind was hitting him right in the nose, but that oil well was kind of masking my smell.
Interesting. So it was an oil well? An
oil well, yep. It was when it's pumping oil. I mean, that's all you can smell is that natural gas and the oils running through there.
Huh. And that was really so potent that it was covering up your scent.
Yeah. I'm one of those people, I don't know about you, but most of us average hunters, we don't always have the option to just hunt the wind. Or, if you want to hunt and you only have X amount of properties, but the wind's blowing in the wrong way, sometimes you got to think of strategies or ways you can eliminate your scent good enough to where you can shoot a mature whitetail downwind of you.
Gotcha. Very interesting strategy. Now, you said sticks, so that indicates to me that this was not a ladder stand. This is probably a hang-on or...
Yeah, it was a lock-on.
Okay, so you're a climber.
I was in a lock-on stand. It's you just put the sticks up as far as they'll go, and then you go up and chain your stand on. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
You like climbing the trees, not necessarily with a climber stand, but with you like to climb the trees. And was this stand set with the sticks well in advance, or is this something you put in that day?
I set this in advance before. To be honest with you, this was a property that I had hunted all my life.
Okay.
And I'm so confident in hunting this property that almost any mature deer on it, I feel like I know his pattern before he even knows that I'm going to be in there. And so I set this stand without knowing that particular buck was there. There was a buck that was on the property from the previous year that I wanted to hunt.
Yeah.
And I knew just about where he was going to be. And I had set this stand up this past summer. And when I had set the camera out, of course, the deer that I wanted was there. And then the next picture was that deer. I was like, okay, we're in business.
Gotcha. So you kind of knew the property. You knew the patterns that these bucks would take.
Yeah.
Then it just so happened that you identified, okay, there's one right here that's probably cruising near this stand. I've got proof, I've got evidence, I've got camera pics. Yeah, we're going to set up here. And at that point, though, it's like you did everything to your ability, but you still didn't know. It's still an element of luck, right? You still have to hope those cross close enough, but you put yourself in a good position based off of your knowledge of what deer do and on a hot day, and getting ready for that opportunity.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So what else do you think about when you're getting ready to hunt? I mean, we talked about your tree stands, knowing the property, you're following the trail camera trails back to, close to bedding areas, so kind of when and where to set up. What else do you use as far as like scent control, clothing for that early season that you love so much?
I like to use I use scent sprays. I like to use Dead Downwind or the Autumn Formula. I really like the Autumn Formula because if you take the leaves and you rake them up, it smells exactly like that Autumn Formula, and that's something that I really like to do. I always like to spray my clothes before I go hunting, and then I keep them in a scent lock bag. That way, I'm not getting any strange odors on them before I go hunting. And then I like to put my clothes on. Either I'll have an underlayer on, and sometimes I'll put my clothes on when I get to the stand. Just take them out of my duffel bag, just depending on the situation that I'm in and where I'm hunting.
Isn't it? Like, it makes you wonder, like, how did they figure out what dirt smells like? Because it definitely has an odor, right? And
yeah.
I always feel like, just from my own experience, if I dig a hole or if I really turn up the earth around my stand, for some reason, deer love that smell. You ever notice that?
Yeah. I think they're just they're curious too. You know, you dig something up or they see something new and they just come to check it out.
Right. I can put out a game camera and I'll dig a couple holes around it, and I guarantee you by the end of that night, 2 or 3 deer will come check that out.
Yeah.
Yep. Very interesting. So we talked about your bows. We talked about your strategies, your time frame, and you think that the early season is the key for you, and is that because of the pressure that the deer season brings with other hunters?
Not necessarily. Okay. I think for me it's because that's when deer are most predictable. I know a lot of people will say, well, the rut, because, you know, you find the does, you find the bucks, but they're constantly running and moving from property to property. Early season, when you hunt a deer, he's sticking within, you know, probably less than a 5-mile radius. He's on that property consistently. Chances are, if you find him in a bean field on your property, he's bedding really close. Because, I mean, in the summertime, they bed, I would say, within 100 yards or less of their food source. And there's about I know there's about I would say a 2, maybe 3 max week span where they're consistently doing the same thing over and over and over. And that, to me, that's the best time to hunt them, because if you can pattern a deer, I mean, you're going to have more of a chance of harvesting it.
How often do you practice shooting your bow?
Just about every day.
Really? Okay. And why do you do that?
I do that because practice makes perfection, man. If you are, like, for me, when I practice, I put myself in hunting situations, and I'll shoot on elevated areas or odd distances. Like, instead of just shooting your 20, 30, 40, you know, maybe you want to shoot 25 or 27 and a half. So you know exactly if that deer's at an odd distance, should I use my 30-yard pin or my 40-yard pin, or, you know, aim a little high or low. And I like to exhaust myself. Like, I'll go in my garage and I'll lift weights. And when I'm as tired as I can be, I'll go shoot because my heart rate's up.
Really? Okay. All right. So you're creating or trying to recreate a hunt scenario.
Yeah, the adrenaline that you get when a big buck's in front of you it's hard to recreate that. You know what I mean? Because your blood's flowing, your heart's pounding. If you can recreate that and you become more comfortable under those situations, I just think it's going to make you a better hunter and help you be able to get your kill shot.
How do you, and I've read about this in multiple sporting and athletic situations, hitting the target spot on, or with a bow and arrow, or hitting a baseball, hitting a golf ball. There seems to be this theory that if you can slow your heart rate down, you breathe, and you get to see your target better. And it's been written about forever in multiple sports. Do you feel that way? Like, yes, you got to get yourself racing, but then you got to figure out how to pull yourself out of that adrenaline rush and sweat and panic, and try to really calm yourself down to take the right shot.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing isn't your heart rate per se. It's being able to control your senses under pressure. Like, when you get excited, you know what I mean? Sometimes you make irrational decisions that maybe you wouldn't make if it was just a doe or something, because that's something that I've struggled with as a hunter, and we all do it, because, you know, when that big buck gets in front of you, you're just excited. Like, mistakes I've made is I'll watch all these does and small bucks walk right past my stand, mm-hmm. and then I see the big buck. So what I do is I'll stand up when that buck's walking right at me, and I'm thinking, you dummy, why'd you do that? If you would have just let that deer walk right by you like you did all the other ones, you would have turned around and had a perfect shot.
Right.
Those are the situations, you know, when you get excited and your heart's racing, that you're not thinking. So, like I said, just having the ability to think and process what's going on while your heart rate is up will make you that much more successful. Once you figure that out, you're going to have more success in the deer woods.
Gotcha. Do you feel like taking a buck early, or not even a buck, but maybe just any deer, like just a doe? Does that help you with, like, the target panic and kind of get you in that right mindset? Is that something that you practice? I've heard that from other hunters, but I'm not sure.
I think It does help, getting it under your belt, getting one out of the way. I think it does help, because you went through the motions. It's kind of like they say in sports that you can't recreate the end game thing. You can practice all you want, but unless you actually did it, it's just not the same.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I think we got a good understanding of who you are and how you hunt and your strategies. And I was wondering if you could take us on a special hunt, one that you've been on before. Maybe it's the one that we've read about, the one that you put off surgery on your arm to go hunt. I don't know if this is the same buck we were talking about. I think it probably that is the story.
That is the 215 that I just shot this past fall. I can brief you in on that a little better if you want to hear about that.
Let's revisit the whole story a little bit from your perspective of how it all played out.
So it was about June. I was working on building a pole barn. I was swinging some hammers, and I just felt like a weird pop in my shoulder, and I'd put it off for a couple days because, sometimes you just pop something and just needs a couple days to heal. Well, I just noticed my shoulder getting bigger and bigger. So I went in and got an MRI, and he told me that my AC joint was separated. I had a bone spur, and I tore my bicep. And this is on my shooting arm too. And my option was get surgery, and you definitely cannot shoot a compound bow, or you just tough it out. And I don't know about you guys, but anytime I have an opportunity at a big deer like that, I was like, you know what, I'll just push it off. And I pushed it off all the way to October. So pretty much after I shot my buck, I went and immediately got that surgery. And kind of a cool picture, if you get on North American Whitetail website and look at their article online, it has a picture of me holding the skull and the rack. I was actually slinged up because I had the surgery right after I shot the buck. So that was kind of a cool thing.
That's crazy. So and it didn't affect your shot, or did you? How much pain were you in?
A lot, but it's just one of those things, man. I've been through a lot of experiences and pain in my life, and I was able to put that off. A story that I share with a lot of people because I kind of, in a way, like my entire thing now is I just want to inspire people to chase their dreams and not live in fear. Because in 2014, I almost lost my life in a work accident. I separated my shoulder. I tore ligaments in my neck, and the whole left side of my face was crushed. And I was paralyzed for a while. And there was a time when I didn't even know if I was ever going to be able to hunt, talk, walk, or do anything again. And to be able to get to this point today, doing the things that I love, I got a beautiful wife. I got 2 children. I was able to harvest a 200-inch deer. I just feel blessed, man. And I want to share that with everybody and, just inspire them to, if there's something you love to do, just pursue it, man, because nothing's going to make you happy until you do that. That's what I've learned in life. And that's where I'm at now, man. I'm pursuing my dreams. So
that's awesome. I mean, it's great that you had the intestinal fortitude to fight through all that stuff, and work through the pain because you knew that there was a result that you were seeking and you weren't going to let it stop you. That's not just a lesson in hunting. That's like a lesson in life, right? Like that's
for real.
Across the board, if you can fight through the adversity and the pain to get to where you want to be, that's what life's all about, really.
Yeah, man. Like I said, I'm a passionate, emotional guy just because I've been through that, and I just, like I said, when you don't know when something you love is getting ready to be taken away from you, and you never know you're going to do it again. When you get the opportunity to do it again, you cherish it and you do everything you can to keep it going.
Yep, gotcha. So where are you at this year? Like now that you've got that amazing buck with a great story under your belt, where are you at this year for planning and strategy? Are you starting to set your game cameras? I think you described that a little bit earlier. What do you have a goal?
I've already got cameras out, and I've already got bucks in mind that I would like to harvest. My entire goal for this year is, for me personally, if I don't even kill a deer this year, I don't care. I want to celebrate with my family and my friends, and we've started our own YouTube channel. We got our own webpage that we've had for about 3 years now, and it's all started to get really big, and we've got sponsors and things like that. And I just want to share my passion for the outdoors with everybody and let them in on my life and, what I do. And just like I said, just share the outdoors and hopefully be able to inspire the youth and get kids involved and just be active in society. That's all I really want out of it.
Gotcha. All right. Let me run 10 rapid fire questions by you. All right. What's your number one hunting tip of all time?
Number one hunting tip of all time. Man, there's a bunch. My number one hunting tip would be sit still and be quiet.
Wait, I think I know where that came from. Sounds like an old Fred Bear tip.
Yeah.
I know exactly where that is. Number two, what's that one thing that you can't hunt without? Like if you, for some reason, other than your weapon, you forget it in the truck or at home, and you don't have it with you, drives you crazy during the whole hunt.
I would have to say, I guess this is part of the weapon. I would say my release, because I've forgotten that a couple times, and I'm like, dag on it.
Yep. I think having a couple of releases that are the same kind of helps sometimes because, for whatever reason, it just seems not to make it to your bag on occasion.
Yeah.
What's your biggest pet peeve in life?
My biggest pet peeve, I describe that a little better for me.
Like the one thing that really bugs you that other people do. Some people it's like bad drivers. Some people it's
the thing that bothers me the most is people not willing to contribute to society.
I like it. Very nice. How old are you today?
I am 29.
All right, you're 29. What would you tell the 15-year-old Ethan Featheroff, knowing what you know today about life?
I would tell him that he should have been chasing his dreams from the time he was a little boy and not to listen to all the doubters.
Gotcha. Nice. You meet a stranger at a hunting convention somewhere in the world and they ask you what you do for a living. What do you tell them?
I tell them I work for a living.
Very nice. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
A banana.
Excellent. I did too. That's really fun. You get your own billboard on the side of a highway. It's a blank canvas. You can put anything you want on it. What would it say?
It would probably say Feathernet Outdoors.
Nice. Very cool. If I say the word successful to you, who's the first person that pops into your head and why?
I would say my parents.
Okay.
And why would be because they raised me to be a man and have a family, and they taught me how to take care of my family. And I think that's one of the most important things to life to me is taking care of my family. And if you come home at night and your kids run into your arms when they're empty, then you're the richest man in the world.
Right. That makes sense. It's, I heard this something interesting the other day. It said that, even if you're the most famous person in the world, there are only 2 or 3 people in this world that can call you dad.
Yeah.
Right. Pretty important. All right. What's a typical day in your life look like?
Man, a lot of building things, eating food, and going home to my family. That's pretty much what that looks like.
All right. And then finally, what's a typical deer hunting day in your life look like?
Spending time with my friends out in a tree stand, filming, making jokes, and hopefully coming back with something good.
Very cool. All right. So if we have created more questions than answers, as we sometimes do on this podcast, where can people find you online, on your YouTube channel, all that stuff? What's the best place to look?
We have Born to be Wild Outdoors and Feathernet Outdoors. I would say Feathernet Outdoors is the best one to go to because that's our most popular site that's been up and running the longest.
Okay. All right. And it's feather, like the word feather, and net.
Yep.
Outdoors.
Yep. That was something I created a long time ago with some friends, and we didn't know it was going to get popular, and it did after I shot that deer. And we were joking around the other day. We were looking online at our social media rank, and we were right there we were tied with Sportsman Guide. And that was a big celebration to us because, man, people are really starting to notice who we are. I mean, we've got several companies that give us product, and we promote their product and give it away on our web pages because it helps them grow as companies, and they give us product in return. And it's been a blessing, man, to get all the stuff that we've got and have been able to accomplish from this. And this is just after, a few short years. I can't imagine 5-10 years down the road where we're going to be with this. I mean, it's a blessing.
That's awesome. That is very cool. Excellent. Ethan, I got to tell you, it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show. I really enjoyed talking to you and kind of figuring out how you go about strategizing to kill big bucks each and every year. And congratulations on the buck you killed last year, and hopefully there's one coming down the road this year for you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on, for sure. It was a pleasure talking to you as well.
Thanks to Ethan Featheroff for joining us on the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. I think you'll find, as I did, that he has some unique strategies and is one heck of a consistent and persistent deer hunter. And some of the things that he's doing definitely makes him one of the better hunters we've talked to. And you don't just kill 5 popin young bucks in a row. There's something that you have to do right in order to make that happen. And Ethan has definitely figured it out. And hopefully, by talking to him in depth like we did, it'll help you in your deer woods figure it out too. Dusty, where can we find you when you're not hanging out here in the studios with me?
Shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. You can look me up on Instagram and Twitter @ChasingAntler, Facebook.com/Chubby Tines Outdoors. Jay, where can the people reach out to you when you're not on the mic?
Likewise, you can shoot me an email, jay@bigbuckregistry.com, and you can visit us on Facebook, facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Twitter, which is twitter.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Instagram, instagram.com/bigbuckregistry, and YouTube, which is youtube.com/bigbuckregistry. On YouTube, you can listen to all of our podcasts in their entirety. As far as videos are concerned, it's a boring video, but the audio content is there, so you can actually listen to our podcast. You can also listen to all of our live shows that we've done on Thursday nights when we do them, and we've gone back and re-interviewed a lot of our previous guests we had on the show just to put a face to a voice, let's put it that way. You can always listen to our show on other places as well, not just YouTube. We're found on Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and as an Amazon Alexa skill. Go to Alexa and say, "Alexa, enable Big Buck Registry." And if you would like to submit a buck to our page for consideration and be featured on our page in front of 250,000 diehard deer hunting fans, all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and all of the instructions will be right there. I think that's pretty much everywhere we're at. I think that's a wrap, Dusty.
That's a whole lot of big buck, Jay.
Sure is. I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
And this is the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.